I've never seen you like this before.
She walked into his corridor naked, thinking no one would be there, but the mafia boss who had sworn never to touch her couldn't look away. What neither of them knew was that this moment would change both their lives forever.
Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
The panic attack hit me in the middle of my father's annual charity gala, surrounded by 300 people in designer gowns and enough diamonds to fund a small country, and the only thought in my oxygen-deprived brain was, get out, get away, find somewhere no one can see you fall apart. I made it to the private wing before my vision tunneled completely, stumbling past security who knew my face well enough not to question a cavaliere wandering where guests weren't allowed, and found the spa room my mother had installed last year, temperature-controlled pool, steam room, complete privacy from the circus happening 3 floors below. The dress came off in shaking hands, the corset that had been crushing my ribs for 4 hours abandoned with it, and I sank into the pool fully naked because modesty felt irrelevant when you couldn't breathe properly, and your entire carefully constructed life was imploding in slow motion. My father wanted me to marry Luca Ferrara. Not wanted, had arranged it, announced it at dinner 3 days ago like I was a business merger instead of his daughter, and when I'd said no, he'd looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "This isn't a request, Sienna. It's what's best for the family. The family. Always the family. The Cavalieri name. The Cavalieri reputation. The Cavalieri empire built on blood and omerta, and my complete erasure of anything resembling personal autonomy." I floated in the heated water trying to remember the breathing techniques my therapist had taught me. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Except my brain kept circling back to Luca's smug face when my father made the announcement, like he'd already won something I hadn't agreed to give. 20 minutes in the pool, another 15 in the steam room letting the heat burn away the panic, and I finally felt human enough to get dressed and return to the gala and pretend I was the perfect Cavalieri daughter instead of someone actively suffocating under expectations she'd never asked for. Except when I walked out of the steam room toward where I'd left my dress. My brain still foggy from heat and residual anxiety. I didn't immediately register that the corridor wasn't empty anymore. I made it 3 steps, completely naked, skin flushed from steam and water still dripping from my hair, before I saw him. Christian Rossi stood at the far end of the marble corridor, 30 feet of Italian stone between us, and I watched him freeze mid-step when he saw me, his expression shifting from neutral to something I couldn't quite identify, before he locked it down with the kind of control that had made him the youngest Don in the city's history. Time stopped. Actually stopped. The world narrowing to just this. Me standing there utterly exposed, him staring at me with eyes so dark they looked black in the low lighting, and the awful realization that I was naked in front of the one man I absolutely could not be naked in front of. "Fuck," I said, the word coming out breathy and horrified, and I watched his jaw tighten at the sound of my voice. He moved before I could, turning away with deliberate precision, his hand already reaching for his suit jacket, and he shrugged out of it without looking at me, holding it out in my direction while keeping his eyes firmly fixed on the opposite wall. "Take it," he said, his voice rougher than usual, carrying an edge I'd never heard before. I should have thanked him, should have grabbed the jacket and covered myself and maybe died of embarrassment, but my brain had apparently short-circuited, because all I could do was stand there frozen while he stood there not looking at me, both of us trapped in this impossible moment. "Sienna," he said, my name sounding different in his mouth, almost pained. "Take the jacket." That broke the spell enough for me to move, crossing the space between us on shaking legs, and taking the jacket from his outstretched hand, our fingers brushing for half a second before he pulled back like I'd burned him. The jacket was warm from his body heat, and smelled like him, something expensive and dark that I'd been noticing for years without admitting I was noticing, and I wrapped it around myself with shaking hands while he remained perfectly still not looking. "Thank you," I managed, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "What are you doing here?" Christian asked, and there was something careful in the way he said it, like he was choosing each word precisely. "This wing is supposed to be restricted during events. I needed air," I said, which wasn't quite a lie. "The gala was overwhelming. So you decided to go swimming," he said, and I heard something that might have been dark amusement beneath the words. "Naked. In a corridor." "The corridor was supposed to be empty," I shot back, embarrassment making me defensive, "and I wasn't in the corridor. I was in the spa room. I just miscalculated my exit timing." "Clearly," Christiane said, and I watched his shoulders shift slightly, tension radiating from him in waves. We stood there in awful silence, him still determinedly not looking at me wrapped in his jacket trying not to think about the fact that he'd seen me completely naked, and that I could never unknow that he knew exactly what I looked like without clothes. "You can turn around now," I said finally, checking that the jacket covered everything important. "I'm decent, relatively." "I don't think that's a good idea," Christian said, and something in his voice made my skin prickle with awareness. "Why not?" "Because," he said carefully, "if I turn around right now, I'm going to be thinking about what's under that jacket. And I can't afford to think about that. The honesty of it hit me like a physical blow, heat flooding through me that had nothing to do with the steam room, and everything to do with the way his voice had dropped on those words. Christian, you should go back to the gala, he interrupted, his tone shifting back to the careful control I was used to. People will notice you're missing. People always notice when I'm missing, I said bitterly. That's the problem. I saw his head tilt slightly, like he wanted to look at me but was restraining himself. What's going on, Sienna? The use of my first name instead of the formal address he usually employed made something in my chest tighten, and before I could stop myself, I said, my father wants me to marry Luca Ferrara. The temperature in the corridor dropped about 20 degrees. When? Christian asked, his voice going flat and dangerous. And he announced it 3 days ago, I said. Apparently it's already arranged. I just forgot to have an opinion about my own life. And you don't want to marry him, Christian said, and it wasn't quite a question. I don't want to marry anyone, I replied, especially not someone my father picked because it's good for the family, but apparently my wants don't factor into Cavalieri business decisions. Christian was quiet for a long moment, and I watched the line of his shoulders shift like he was processing something complicated. Your father is making a mistake, he said finally. Which part? I asked. Arranging my marriage, or picking Luca specifically? Both, Christian said. And there was steel in his voice now. Luca Ferrara is a liability waiting to happen. He's reckless with money, careless with secrets, and too ambitious for someone with his limited capabilities. Your father should see that. My father sees an alliance with the Ferrara shipping routes, I said tiredly. That's all that matters. That's not all that matters, Christian corrected, and I heard frustration bleed into his tone. You matter. Your future matters. Whether you're happy matters. The words hit harder than they should have, and I felt tears burn behind my eyes that I absolutely refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Why do you care? I asked, and the question came out more vulnerable than intended. Christian finally turned around. His eyes met mine across the 5 feet of space between us, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch, heat and restraint, and something darker that looked almost like longing. That's a dangerous question, he said quietly, with a more dangerous answer. Tell me anyway, I said, because apparently nearly dying of embarrassment had destroyed my sense of self-preservation. Because, Christian said, his voice dropping lower, more intimate, you've always mattered to me, even when you shouldn't have, even when I swore you wouldn't. The confession hung between us, charged with years of unspoken things, and I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. We can't, I started, but he held up a hand. I know, he interrupted. Believe me, I know. You're Giovanni Cavalieri's daughter. I'm the Rossi Don. Our families have an understanding that specifically excludes me ever crossing certain lines with you. What lines? I asked, my heart hammering. All of them, Christian said bluntly. Your father and mine made an agreement years ago. Before I took over, you're protected. Sienna, protected means untouchable. Protected means I don't get to look at you the way I want to look at you. Don't get to think about you the way I constantly think about you. And definitely don't get to see you naked in corridors even when the universe apparently has a sense of humor. And I should have been offended by the idea of being protected, like I was property. But all I could focus on was the part where he thought about me constantly, wanted to look at me differently, was fighting restraint as hard as I suddenly was. And what if I don't want to be protected? I asked. The words reckless and dangerous and entirely honest. Something flared in Christian's eyes, hot and predatory, before he controlled it. Then you'd still be protected, because I gave my word, and I don't break my word, even if I asked you to. Especially then, he said, but his voice had gone rough again. Sienna, you need to go back to the gala. You need to put on your dress, return my jacket, and pretend this never happened. What if I can't pretend? I challenged. Then we're both in trouble, Christian said, and I heard the truth of it beneath the careful control. Because I've spent 5 years pretending I don't notice everything about you, and seeing you like this just made that approximately 1,000 times harder. 5 years, I repeated, my brain catching on that number. You've been noticing me for 5 years, since you were 20. And came home from university for your father's birthday party wearing that red dress, Christian admitted, and he looked almost angry at himself for saying it. You laughed at something your brother said and the whole room lit up, and I realized I was completely fucked because I wanted you and I could never have you. The honesty was devastating, and I took a step toward him without thinking. Watching him tense like my proximity was physically painful. Don't, he said, holding up a hand. Don't come closer. I'm barely holding on to my control as it is. Maybe I don't want you to have control, I said, surprising myself with the boldness. Maybe I don't have a choice, Christian countered. Your father would kill me, actually kill me, and I deserve it for breaking my word. My father is trying to marry me off to Luca Ferrara, I said, anger making my voice sharp. So forgive me if I don't particularly care about what my father wants right now. Sienna, I should go, I interrupted, because this conversation was heading somewhere dangerous, and I wasn't sure either of us could handle where it would end up. Thank you for the jacket, and for not looking. Mostly. I looked, Christian admitted, and my stomach flipped. Not deliberately, but I looked. And I'm going to be thinking about what I saw for a very long time, which is a problem I'll have to deal with later. Is that a warning? I asked. It's a promise, he replied. Things just changed between us and Sienna, whether we want them to or not. What if I do want them to? I asked quietly. Christian stared at me for a long moment, and I saw him war with something before he spoke. Then we're both about to make some very complicated decisions, he said. But not tonight. Tonight you go back to the gala, smile at the right people, and think about what you actually want. Because if you decide you want this, he gestured between us, then there's no going back. You understand that? I understand, I said, even though I wasn't sure I understood anything except that the air between us had shifted into something electric and dangerous and impossible to ignore. Good, Christian said, pulling out his phone. I'm clearing this wing for the next 15 minutes. Get dressed, compose yourself, and return to the party. We never saw each other tonight. We didn't? I asked. We didn't, he confirmed, but his eyes told a different story. And Sienna? If your father pushes the Luca situation, tell him you need time. Buy yourself space to think. Don't agree to anything you're not ready for. Why do you care? I asked again. Because, Christian said, his voice going soft in a way that made my chest ache. Someone should care about what you want, even if I can't be the one to give it to you. He left before I could respond, disappearing down the corridor with that predatory grace, and I stood there wrapped in his jacket that still smelled like him, trying to process what had just happened. I'd walked into a corridor naked. Christian Rossi had seen me, and something fundamental had shifted between us that I didn't think either of us could undo, even if we tried.
Honestly, she had a panic attack, went swimming naked. The man she's forbidden to touch saw everything and admitted he's wanted her for 5 years. Barely managing to control himself. Is there a better moment for that to happen? I don't think so. This is the slowest burn, already starting at maximum temperature, and I know you love it.
Chapter 2. Pretending. I made it back to my room, got dressed in a spare gown I kept for emergencies, black silk that my mother said made me look too severe, but I loved anyway, and stared at myself in the mirror, trying to figure out if I looked like someone who'd just been seen naked by a man who'd admitted to wanting her for 5 years. My face was flushed, but that could be explained by the steam room. My hands were shaking, but that could be residual panic attack. The fact that I could still smell Christian's cologne on my skin despite showering, that had no good explanation except the truth. Pull it together, I told my reflection. You're a Cavalieri. You can survive 4 more hours of fake smiling. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Marco. Marco, where the hell did you disappear to? Dad's looking for you. And Luca's here being his usual charming self. Me. Define charming. Marco. He asked if you were warming up to the idea of the engagement, and I had to physically restrain myself from punching him. Me. Don't get blood on your tux. Mom will kill you. Marco. Worth it. Seriously though, where are you? Me. Needed air. Heading back now. I took the service elevator down to avoid running into anyone who'd ask questions I couldn't answer, and re-entered the ballroom through the side entrance near the catering station, grabbing champagne from a passing waiter like armor. The gala was exactly as I'd left it, excessive flower arrangements, string quartet playing something classical and forgettable, people in circles discussing business disguised as small talk. My mother held court near the windows, resplendent in emerald silk. My father stood with a group of men I recognized as various family associates, his laugh carrying across the room in that particular way that meant he was closing deals. And Christian stood near the bar with a woman I didn't recognize, tall and stunning in red, her hand on his arm while she laughed at something he'd said, and I felt something hot and ugly twist in my chest that I absolutely refused to identify as jealousy. There you are. Marco appeared beside me, following my gaze. You've noticed Christian's new shadow. I haven't noticed anything, I said, taking a long drink of champagne. Right, Marco said, utterly unconvinced. That's why you're glaring at Valentina Russo like she personally offended you. I'm not glaring, I protested. You're absolutely glaring, Marco corrected. It's very obvious, also very interesting, considering you've spent years pretending Christian Rossi doesn't exist. I don't pretend he doesn't exist, I said, and I acknowledge his existence in appropriate professional contexts. Appropriate professional contexts, Marco repeated mockingly. Sienna, you literally leave rooms when he enters them. You've perfected the art of looking through him at family dinners. You once hid behind a plant at Uncle Tommaso's wedding to avoid talking to him. That plant was strategically located, I said defensively. You're ridiculous, Marco said fondly, but I love you anyway. Now tell me why you're back to glaring at Valentina. I wasn't glaring anymore, because Christian had looked up and our eyes met across the ballroom, and I watched recognition flare in his expression before he controlled it, his face going carefully neutral while Valentina continued talking. Oblivious. I'm not glaring, I repeated, but my voice came out slightly breathless. Marco said. You know she's been circling him for months, right? Valentina, daughter of the Russo Hotel Empire. Very beautiful, very available, very determined to become the next Rossi Donna. Good for her, I said, my jaw tight. Doesn't bother you at all, Marco pressed. Why would it bother me? Because you've been half in love with him since you were 20, Marco said casually, like he hadn't just detonated a bomb. I turned to stare at my brother. I have not, please, Marco interrupted. I've watched you not watch him for 5 years. It's exhausting. Also very obvious to everyone except apparently Dad, who's too busy arranging your life to notice you're actively dying inside. I'm not dying inside, I protested weakly. You had a panic attack and disappeared for 40 minutes, Marco said, his voice going softer. You're dying inside, and Dad forcing you to marry Luca isn't helping. How do you know about the panic attack? I asked. Because I know you, Marco said simply. You get that look in your eyes when you're about to break, and you disappear to somewhere with water, pool, beach, bath, whatever. You've done it since we were kids. The observation was so accurate, it made my throat tight. I hate that you know me so well. I'm your brother, Marco said. It's literally my job. Now, are we going to talk about the Christian situation? Or are you going to keep pretending you don't care while mentally murdering Valentina? There is no Christian situation, I said firmly. Then why is he staring at you like you're the only person in this room? Marco asked, and I made the mistake of looking again. Christian was still near the bar, Valentina still talking animatedly, but his attention was entirely on me, his dark eyes tracking my every movement with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. He's not staring, I said. He's absolutely staring, Marco corrected. And you're staring back. This is the most interesting thing that's happened at one of Dad's boring events in years. Before I could respond, Luca Ferrara appeared in my peripheral vision, moving through the crowd with his usual swagger, and I felt Marco tense beside me. Incoming, my brother muttered. Try not to throw your champagne in his face. Mom will never forgive you. No promises, I said. Luca reached us with a smile that probably worked on other women but made my skin crawl. Sienna, you look beautiful tonight. Where have you been hiding? I wasn't hiding, I said evenly. I was unavailable. Well, you're available now, Luca said, completely missing or ignoring the distinction. Dance with me. We should get to know each other better before the engagement becomes official. The engagement isn't official, I corrected. And I don't dance. Everyone dances at galas, Luca said, reaching for my hand. And then I'll be the exception, I replied, pulling back before he could touch me. Something flashed in Luca's eyes, irritation beneath the charm. Your father mentioned you might need some convincing about our arrangement. I'm happy to be patient, but eventually you'll need to accept reality. Reality is, I don't want to marry you, I said bluntly, too emotionally exhausted to be diplomatic. No amount of patience changes that. Sienna, Marco started, warning in his tone. It's fine, Luca interrupted, though his smile had gone sharp. She's spirited. I like that. Makes things more interesting. I'm not a horse to be broken, I said, anger making my voice cold. Well, and you're not interesting. You're insufferable. Luca's expression darkened, and I saw Marco shift slightly, positioning himself between us. But before the situation could escalate further, a voice cut through the tension. Sienna, your mother is asking for you. Christian had materialized beside us with that eerie silence powerful men seemed to cultivate, and I watched Luca's entire demeanor shift from aggressive to cautious in the space of a heartbeat. Christian, Luca said, forcing casualness. Didn't see you there. Clearly, Christian replied, his tone flat. Sienna, it wasn't quite a question, more an offer of escape, and I took it gratefully. Excuse me, I said to Luca without looking at him, and let Christian guide me away with his hand hovering near my lower back, but not quite touching, maintaining propriety while everyone watched. My mother isn't actually asking for me, is she? I said quietly when we were out of Luca's earshot. No, Christian admitted, but you looked like you were about to say something that would make your father's political situation complicated, so I intervened. My hero, I said dryly. Hardly, Christian replied. More like damage control. Luca's father controls the southern shipping routes. Your father needs that alliance. You punching Luca in the face, which you absolutely looked ready to do, would complicate things. I wasn't going to punch him, I protested. Your brother was, Christian observed, which would have been equally problematic. We'd reached a quieter corner near the garden doors, far enough from the main crowd that we could talk without being overheard, and I turned to face him properly for the first time since the corridor. Thank you, I said, for the rescue. Even if it was just damage control. It wasn't just damage control, Christian said, and his voice dropped lower. I don't like the way he looks at you. How does he look at me? I asked. Like you're something he owns, Christian replied. and there was steel beneath the words. Like your refusal is just an obstacle to work around instead of an actual answer. Welcome to my life, I said bitterly, where my opinions are suggestions, and my father makes all actual decisions. That's not sustainable, Christian said. Tell that to Giovanni Cavalieri, I replied. See how far it gets you. I might, Christian said, surprising me. If the alternative is watching you get forced into something that makes you miserable, why would you do that? I asked. It's not your problem. Because, Christian said, his eyes finding mine with that same intensity from the corridor. I told you I gave my word about certain lines I wouldn't cross. I never said I'd stand by and watch you get hurt. That's a dangerous distinction, I said, echoing his words from earlier. It's an important one, he corrected. And then Valentina appeared, her smile bright and possessive as she slipped her arm through Christian's. And there you are, she said, completely ignoring me. You disappeared. I was telling you about the charity auction next month and you just vanished. I apologize, Christian said smoothly, though I noticed he didn't pull away from her touch. I had business to handle. Business, Valentina repeated, finally seeming to notice my existence. Oh, hello, Sienna. You look lovely tonight. That dress is very severe. Thank you, I said with false sweetness. Severe is what I was going for. How unique, Valentina replied, and I couldn't tell if she was being genuine or subtly insulting. Christian, we should get back. Your mother wanted to introduce me to someone. Of course, Christian said, and I watched him shift back into perfect propriety, the moment between us dissolving like it had never existed. Sienna, give your mother my regards. He left with Valentina attached to his arm like an accessory, and I stood there trying not to watch them go, trying not to notice how easily he walked away, trying not to care that she got to touch him casually while I was forbidden from even being too close. That looked painful, Marco said, reappearing with fresh champagne. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, accepting the glass. Right, Marco said. Because you definitely weren't imagining creative ways to make Valentina disappear. I don't know her well enough to imagine her disappearance, I said primly. But you'd like to, Marco observed. Shut up, I said without heat. This is going to be a disaster, my brother said cheerfully. You, Christian, Valentina, Luca, Dad's political machinations. It's like watching a very expensive train wreck in slow motion. Thank you for that comforting assessment, I said dryly. Any time, Marco replied. For what it's worth, Christian looked ready to murder Luca when he grabbed at you. He didn't grab at me, I corrected. He reached. There's a difference. Not to Christian, apparently, Marco said. Seriously, Sienna, what happened between you two? You've been weird all night, and he's been watching you like you're about to disappear. Nothing happened, I lied. You're a terrible liar, Marco observed. I'm an excellent liar, I corrected. You just know me too well. So something did happen, Marco pressed. Drop it, I said, finishing my champagne. Please, Marco, just drop it. My brother studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, dropped. But Sienna, whatever's going on, be careful. Christian Rossi might be a good man by mafia standards, but he's still a Don, and you're still a Cavalieri. That's a complicated equation. I know, I said quietly, watching Christian across the ballroom, laughing at something Valentina said while his eyes tracked my movements. Believe me, I know, but knowing something was complicated didn't make wanting it any less consuming, and I was starting to realize I wanted Christian Rossi more than I'd ever wanted anything in my carefully controlled life, which was absolutely, definitely, catastrophically going to be a problem.
She's shooting furious looks at Valentina. Her brother knows she's been half in love with Christian for years. Luca is being disturbingly possessive. Christian rescued her and admitted he doesn't like the way Luca looks at her. And now she's watching him with another woman while burning with jealousy. She refuses to admit the intensity is intensing.
Chapter 3. Professional Distance. I made it through the rest of the gala by drinking exactly enough champagne to be numb but not sloppy, avoiding both Luca and Christian with equal determination, and perfecting the art of looking engaged in conversations I wasn't actually listening to. By the time the last guests left around 2 a.m., I was exhausted in ways that went beyond physical, and I retreated to my childhood bedroom in my father's house because driving home felt impossible. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Christian's expression when he'd seen me in that corridor, the way his jaw had tightened, the rough edge to his voice when he'd admitted thinking about me for 5 years, and I felt heat flood through me that had absolutely no business existing given our circumstances. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, you looked beautiful tonight. Even in the severe black dress, my heart stopped. Me, who is this? Unknown, you know who this is. Me, Christian. Unknown, I'm saving you in my contacts under something innocuous. Family business. If anyone looks, it's work-related. Me, is this work-related? Christian. No, me. Then why are you texting me at 3 a.m.? Christian. Because I can't sleep. Because every time I close my eyes, I see you in that corridor. Because I'm trying very hard to maintain appropriate distance and failing spectacularly. I stared at my phone, my pulse racing, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I tried to figure out what to say that wouldn't make this more complicated than it already was. Me, we can't do this. Christian, I know. Me, your word to my father. The agreement. The lines you can't cross. Christian, I know. Me, then why are you texting me? Christian, because I'm weak. Because seeing you with Luca made me want to break every promise I've ever made. Because I needed you to know you're not imagining what's between us. Me, I never said I was imagining anything. Christian, you didn't have to. I saw it in your eyes tonight when Valentina touched me. You looked at her like you wanted her to spontaneously combust. Me, I did not. Christian, you absolutely did. It was extremely gratifying. Me, you're enjoying this. Christian, no, I'm suffering through this. But knowing you're suffering too makes it slightly more bearable. Me, that's twisted. Christian, welcome to how I've felt for 5 years. Good night, Sienna. Sleep well, or don't. Either way, know that I'm not sleeping either. He didn't text again, and I lay there staring at my phone for another hour before exhaustion finally claimed me. 3 days later, my father called me into his office at the family estate, with the kind of summons that wasn't really a request, and I showed up in business, casual, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Sienna, sit, he said, not looking up from the paperwork spread across his massive desk. We need to discuss the Ferrara situation. There is no situation, I said, remaining standing. And I told you I'm not marrying Luca. And I told you that's not a viable option, my father replied, finally looking at me with those cold eyes that had terrified me as a child. The Ferrara alliance is critical for our southern expansion. Luca is willing to marry you. His father has agreed to the terms, and you will stop being difficult about this. I'm not being difficult, I said, my voice harder than usual. I'm being honest. I don't love him, I don't like him, and I'm not spending my life with someone I can barely tolerate. Love, my father said with derision. You sound like your mother. This isn't about love, it's about family, about duty, about understanding that your personal preferences are secondary to Cavalieri interests. My entire life has been secondary to Cavalieri interests, I shot back. But when do I get to matter? You matter when you contribute something useful, my father said bluntly. Right now you're a liability. Beautiful, educated, completely wasted potential because you refuse to use the one asset you have, your name and your marriageability. The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral, because showing hurt to Giovanni Cavalieri was showing weakness. I have other assets, I said carefully. My business degree, my language skills, my understanding of the family operations, all useless if you can't leverage them properly, my father interrupted. The Ferrara marriage gives us access to shipping routes that would take years to develop otherwise. That's leverage. That's useful. Your feelings about Luca are irrelevant. They're relevant to me, I said. Then you're more naive than I thought, my father replied, returning to his paperwork in a clear dismissal. The engagement will be announced in 2 weeks at the Rossi Charity Gala. I suggest you adjust your attitude by then. And if I don't, I challenged. My father looked up with an expression that made my blood run cold. Then I'll adjust it for you. You're a Cavalieri, Sienna. Start acting like one. I left his office with my hands shaking and rage burning in my chest, and nearly collided with Christian, who was apparently arriving for a meeting I hadn't known was scheduled. Sienna, he said, catching my arm to steady me. Are you all right? Fine, I lied, pulling away from his touch because it felt too good, and I couldn't afford good right now. Just leaving. You're not fine, Christian said, his eyes tracking my face with that intensity I was starting to recognize. What did Giovanni say? Nothing I didn't expect, I said, trying to move past him. Sienna, I can't do this right now, I interrupted, and I heard my voice crack slightly. And I can't stand here and pretend everything's fine while you go in there and have meetings about business I'm not important enough to be part of. You are important, Christian said quietly. More important than you realize. Not to my father, I said bitterly. To him, I'm just a bargaining chip. A pretty face to marry off for shipping routes. Christian's expression darkened. He told you about the engagement announcement. You knew, I asked, betrayal sharp in my chest. You knew he was going to force this and you didn't warn me. I found out this morning, Christian said, and I'm here to talk him out of it. I stared at him. Why would you do that? Because it's a bad strategic move, Christian said, but something in his eyes told me that wasn't the whole truth. The Ferraras are unstable. Luca specifically is a liability. Your father is blinded by the shipping routes and not seeing the bigger picture. Which is, I asked, that marrying you to Luca weakens the Cavalieri position instead of strengthening it, Christian said. And I'm going to make sure Giovanni understands that before this goes any further. He won't listen to you, I said. He will if I present it correctly, Christian replied with certainty. Trust me. I barely know you, I said, even though it felt like a lie. Why would I trust you? Because I've never lied to you, Christian said simply. Because I told you someone should care about what you want, and I meant it. And because right now, I'm the only person in this house who's trying to protect your interests instead of exploit them. Before I could respond, My father's voice called from inside the office. Christian, are you planning to stand in the hallway all day or actually attend this meeting? Go, I said quietly. Do whatever you're going to do. I'll be in the garden if it matters. It matters, Christian said, and something in the way he said it made my chest tight. I escaped to the gardens before anyone else could trap me in conversations I didn't want to have, finding the secluded bench near the fountain where I'd hidden as a teenager when things got overwhelming, and tried to process the fact that my father was announcing my engagement in 2 weeks and Christian Rossi was apparently trying to stop it. My phone buzzed. Marco, Dad just told me about the engagement announcement. I'm sorry, Sienna. I tried to talk to him, but he's immovable on this. Me, it's fine. I'm handling it. Marco, you're not fine and you're not handling it. Where are you? Me, garden. Don't come find me. I need to think. Marco, thinking alone in the garden is how you end up having panic attacks. I'm coming. Me, Marco, please. But he was already there, appearing around the hedge with concern written all over his face and 2 coffees in his hands. You look like hell, he observed, sitting beside me and handing over a cup. Thank you. That's very comforting, I said, accepting the coffee. I'm your brother, not your therapist, Marco replied. Comfort isn't my strong suit. Brutal honesty is. Then be brutally honest, I said. Is there any way out of this? Marco was quiet for a long moment, not without consequences. If you refuse the engagement publicly, Dad will see it as betrayal. He'll cut you off, probably, and make your life extremely difficult. I can live with difficult, I said. Can you live with being disowned? Marco asked. With losing access to the family, the business, everything you've known, because that's what refusing him means. Sienna, he's not bluffing about this. So my options are marry Luca or lose everything, I said flatly. Unless someone more powerful than Dad intervenes, Marco said carefully. And someone whose opinion he actually respects. Like who? I asked, though I already knew. Like Christian Rossi, Marco said, who is currently in Dad's office arguing against the engagement on strategic grounds. How do you know that? I asked. Because I have better intel than you do, Marco replied. Also because I was outside the office when Christian arrived, and he told me specifically what he was planning to do. Which was interesting, considering he has no obligation to care about our family politics. He says it's bad strategy, I said. He says it's bad strategy, Marco agreed. But he looks at you like it's personal, which is far more interesting. He doesn't. Sienna, I love you, but you're terrible at reading obvious signals, Marco interrupted. Christian Rossi has been circling you for years with perfect propriety, maintaining exactly the right distance, being completely professional, and now suddenly he's fighting Dad about your marriage. That's not strategic, that's personal. You don't know that, I said weakly. I know he left his meeting with Dad 3 minutes ago and is currently walking toward the gardens, Marco said, standing up. And so I'm going to make myself scarce, and you're going to have whatever conversation you two clearly need to have. Marco, trust me on this, my brother said. Or don't. Either way, I'm leaving. He disappeared before I could argue, and 60 seconds later, Christian appeared, his expression tight with tension. Jacket off and tie loosened like the meeting had been difficult. How did you know I was here? I asked. Marco told me, Christian said, sitting beside me without asking permission. Very specifically told me, along with a thinly veiled threat about what would happen if I hurt you. Did he? I asked, something warm blooming in my chest. He's protective of you, Christian observed. It's admirable. Did you talk to my father? I asked, deflecting. Yes, Christian said, and I watched his jaw tighten. He's not budging on the engagement. I presented every strategic reason why it's a bad move, and he dismissed all of them. So it didn't work, I said, trying not to let disappointment show. I didn't say that, Christian corrected. I said he's not budging, but I planted seeds, made him think about the instability of the Ferrara organization, the risks of tying the Cavalieri name to theirs, the potential complications if Luca's recklessness causes problems. That doesn't stop the announcement, I pointed out. No, Christian agreed, but it buys time. And time is what you need right now to figure out what you actually want. I know what I want, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I want my father to see me as something more than a bargaining chip. I want to matter for who I am, not who I can marry. I stopped, because what I wanted included the man sitting beside me, and saying that out loud felt impossible. What else do you want? Christian asked quietly, and something in his tone told me he already knew. Things I can't have, I said instead. Because they're forbidden, Christian said, and it wasn't a question. Because your father and mine made an agreement that protects you from men like me. What if I don't need protection? I asked, turning to face him properly. Then you're more reckless than I thought, Christian replied, but his eyes were dark with heat. Because men like me are exactly what you should be protected from. Why? I challenged. Because you're a Don? Because you're dangerous? Because you admitted you've wanted me for 5 years? All of those, Christian said. And because if I touch you, if I cross that line, there's no coming back. Your father would see it as betrayal. The alliance between our families would fracture. Everything your father has built would be at risk. Maybe I don't care about what my father built, I said recklessly. You don't mean that, Christian said. Don't tell me what I mean, I shot back. You don't get to stand there looking at me like that, telling me you can't have me, and then dictate how I feel about it. How am I looking at you? Christian asked, his voice dropping dangerously low. Like you're starving, I said, meeting his eyes. Like seeing me in that corridor broke something in your control, and you're barely holding on. I am barely holding on, Christian admitted. Seeing you naked, seeing Luca touch you, watching Valentina try to stake a claim I can't challenge. I'm barely fucking holding on, Sienna. The raw honesty in his voice made my breath catch, and I watched him struggle with restraint that was visibly crumbling. Then stop holding on, I said. Reckless and desperate and tired of pretending. Stop fighting this. I can't, Christian said. But he'd shifted closer, close enough that I could feel his body heat. I gave my word, to my father, I said, not to me, and I never agreed to be protected from you. Sienna, kiss me, I interrupted. Right here, right now. Kiss me and prove this isn't just in my head. If I kiss you, Christian said, his hand coming up to cup my face with devastating gentleness, everything changes. You understand that. I'm counting on it, I said, and then his mouth was on mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. Harder, hungrier, 5 years of restraint breaking into something consuming. His hand tightened on my face, his other arm pulling me closer, and I kissed him back with equal desperation, tasting coffee and want, and the kind of chemistry that made rational thought impossible. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard, and I saw his control completely shattered in his expression. Fuck, he said eloquently. Yeah, I agreed, my lips feeling swollen and sensitive. That can't happen again, Christian said, but he hadn't let me go, his hands still on me like he couldn't quite make himself release me. Why not? I challenged. Because your father will find out, Christian said. Because there are eyes everywhere in this house. Because someone already saw us. My blood ran cold. What? Look to your left, Christian said quietly. Past the hedge, there's a security camera. It's been recording this entire conversation. I turned and saw it. The small dome camera mounted on the garden wall, perfectly positioned to capture everything. Oh my God, I whispered. Your father watches the feeds, Christian said, and I heard resignation in his voice, which means he's probably already seen this, which means we're both about to have very complicated problems. What do we do? I asked. We face consequences, Christian said, finally releasing me and standing, and hope that what we just started is worth what it's about to cost us. He left before I could respond, and I sat there in the garden with my lips still tingling, and the horrifying realization that my father had probably just watched me kiss the one man I was explicitly forbidden to touch, and that everything was about to get catastrophically worse. Chapter 4. Consequences. I made it exactly 4 hours before my father summoned me back to his office, and the fact that he waited even that long told me he was planning his response carefully, which was infinitely more terrifying than immediate rage would have been. Marco intercepted me in the hallway outside, his expression grim. He knows, my brother said without preamble. He watched the security footage, twice. How bad? I asked, my stomach dropping. Bad enough that he sent Christian away without finishing their meeting, Marco said. Bad enough that he's been making phone calls for the past 3 hours. Bad enough that Mom took one look at his face and left for her sister's house. Fantastic, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Any other encouraging news? Luca's father called, Marco added. Dad told him the engagement is moving forward immediately. As in, announcement tonight at some family dinner. I didn't know was happening until 20 minutes ago. The world tilted slightly. Tonight, apparently watching you kiss Christian Rossi accelerated Dad's timeline. Marco said, he's making a statement. You belong to the Ferraras now, not the Rossis, and everyone needs to know it. I don't belong to anyone, I said, anger cutting through fear. Tell that to Dad, Marco replied. Good luck. You're going to need it. He squeezed my shoulder once and left, and I stood outside my father's office for a long moment, gathering courage before finally knocking. Enter. My father's voice came through, cold and controlled. I walked in to find him behind his desk, a tablet in front of him showing a paused image of the garden, of me and Christian, caught in the moment right before he'd kissed me. Sit, my father said, not looking at me. I sat, keeping my expression neutral even though my heart was hammering. Explain, my father said, finally looking up. Explain why I just watched security footage of you kissing Christian Rossi in my garden after I explicitly forbade any personal involvement between you two. I started, but he held up a hand. Actually, don't explain, he interrupted, because there is no explanation that makes this acceptable. You knew the rules. You knew why those rules existed, and you broke them anyway. The rules are yours. Not mine, I said, finding my voice. I never agreed to them. You didn't have to agree, my father said coldly. You're a cavaliere. That means you follow cavaliere rules whether you like them or not. Even when those rules mean sacrificing my entire life? I challenged. Your life was never yours to sacrifice, my father replied. It belongs to this family. Every choice you make reflects on us. Every relationship you pursue impacts our alliances. You don't get to be selfish about this, Sienna. Wanting to choose who I kiss is selfish? I asked incredulously. Wanting to kiss the one man specifically forbidden to you is worse than selfish, my father said. It's stupid. Do you have any idea what you've risked? The agreement between our families exists for a reason. Christian's father and I established those boundaries to prevent exactly this kind of complication. Why? I demanded. Why is it so forbidden? What's so terrible about me and Christian that requires explicit prohibition? My father was quiet for a long moment, something complicated passing across his expression before he controlled it. Because Vincent Rossi asked me to protect you from his son, he said finally. Because before Christian became Don, before he proved himself capable of control, he was dangerous in ways you don't understand. Vincent was terrified of what his son might become, what darkness he carried, and he made me promise, made me swear, that you would never be exposed to that. The revelation hit like cold water. Christian asked his father to keep me away from him. Christian didn't ask anything, my father corrected. Vincent did, because he saw how his son looked at you even then, when you were barely 20, and he was becoming something Vincent didn't recognize. And Vincent loved you like a daughter. Sienna, he wanted you safe. I felt something crack in my chest, because Vincent Rossi had died 2 years ago, and I'd mourned him genuinely, and learning he'd been protecting me from his own son complicated everything. Christian isn't dangerous, I said, though my voice wavered slightly. And Christian is the most dangerous man in this city, my father corrected. He's just learned to hide it better than most. But that doesn't change what he is, what he's capable of. And I will not watch you destroy yourself because you think you're in love with him. I never said I was in love with him, I protested. You didn't have to, my father replied. I saw the footage. I saw how you looked at him. And I'm telling you now, as your father, that this ends today. You will attend dinner tonight. You will sit beside Luca Ferrara, and you will smile when I announce your engagement. Do you understand? And if I refuse? I asked. Then you're no longer my daughter, my father said flatly. You're no longer a cavaliere. You're no longer welcome in this house or any family property. You'll be cut off completely. Financially, socially, professionally. Everything you have comes from this family, Sienna. Everything you are exists because of the Cavaliere name. Take that away, and you're nothing. The cruelty of it stole my breath, and I stared at my father trying to find the man who'd read me bedtime stories, and taught me to ride horses, and told me I could be anything I wanted. But that man wasn't here. Only Giovanni Cavaliere existed now, calculating, cold, willing to destroy his own daughter to maintain control. I hate you, I said quietly, the words coming from somewhere deep and honest. That's your prerogative, my father replied without emotion. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. I found Christian in the parking area getting into his car, and I ran before thinking about whether it was smart, calling his name before he could drive away. He stopped, turned, and I watched his expression shift from neutral to concerned when he saw my face. And what happened? He asked immediately. He knows, I said, slightly breathless from running. Obviously, the cameras, he watched us, and now he's forcing the engagement announcement tonight and threatening to disown me if I don't comply. Christian's expression went deadly. He threatened you. He gave me a choice, I corrected. Marry Luca or lose everything. Family, money, name, all of it. That's not a choice, Christian said, his voice hard. And that's coercion. It's my reality, I replied. And I need to know, did your father really ask mine to keep us apart? Was that true? Christian went very still. He told you about that. So it's true, I said, something in my chest constricting. Your father was protecting me from you. My father was protecting you from who I might become, Christian corrected carefully. He knew I was taking over operations that required certain moral compromises. He knew the kind of man the position would make me, and he loved you enough to make sure you'd never be collateral damage to that transformation. And you agreed to this? I asked. You let him dictate who you could care about. I didn't have a choice, Christian said. My father was dying. It was one of his last requests, that I protect you by staying away from you. How could I refuse that? By being honest, I said. By telling me years ago instead of letting me think you just weren't interested. If I'd told you, would it have changed anything? Christian challenged. Your father would still forbid it. My promise would still exist. We'd still be exactly where we are now, wanting something we can't have. At least I'd have known why, I said, tears burning behind my eyes that I refused to let fall. At least I wouldn't have spent 5 years wondering what was wrong with me that you'd never even look at me properly. Nothing is wrong with you, Christian said fiercely, moving closer. Everything is wrong with me. I'm the problem, Sienna. I'm the reason we can't have this. No, I said. They are. My father. Your father. All these men making decisions about my life without asking what I want. I'm so tired of being protected from things I might actually choose if anyone bothered to give me the option. Sienna, I'm going to that dinner tonight. I interrupted. I'm going to sit beside Luca and let my father make his announcement because I don't have any other viable options. But I need you to know that I'm not doing it because I want to. I'm doing it because I'm trapped. You're not trapped, Christian said. There are always options. Like what? I challenged. Run away? Live on nothing? Lose my entire family because I kissed you once in a garden? Those aren't options. Those are different versions of losing. Christian stared at me for a long moment, something painful working across his expression. What if you didn't have to choose between your family and what you want? He asked carefully. That's not possible, I said. What if I made it possible? Christian pressed. What if I could give you a way out that didn't require you to sacrifice everything? How? I asked, suspicious and hopeful in equal measure. Let me handle your father, Christian said. Let me find leverage that makes him reconsider forcing this marriage. It'll take time, but I can do it. And in the meantime, I asked, I just pretend to be engaged to Luca. In the meantime, you buy me time to work, Christian said. Don't marry him. Delay, stall, find excuses. Just don't sign anything that makes it permanent. My father won't wait long, I said. Then I'll work fast, Christian replied. But Sienna, you need to trust me. Can you do that? I looked at him. This dangerous man who'd admitted to wanting me for years, who'd kissed me knowing it would have consequences, who was now offering to fight my father on my behalf. And I made a decision that was either the smartest or stupidest thing I'd ever done. Yes, I said. I trust you. Good, Christian said, and something in his expression shifted to determination. Go to the dinner, play your part, but remember that you're not alone in this. Not anymore. He left, and I stood there in the parking area trying to believe that trusting Christian Rossi wasn't going to destroy me. The dinner was exactly as excruciating as I'd anticipated. 20 family members and associates gathered in the formal dining room, Luca beside me touching my hand every chance he got, my father presiding over everything with satisfied control. A toast, my father said when dessert was served, raising his wine glass. To my daughters Sienna and Luca Ferrara, whose engagement I'm pleased to officially announce tonight. May their union strengthen both our families for generations. Everyone raised glasses, offered congratulations, and I sat there with a frozen smile while Luca kissed my cheek possessively and my mother watched with worried eyes from across the table. You look beautiful tonight, Luca said in my ear, his hand sliding to my thigh under the table. Soon I'll get to see exactly how beautiful. Touch me again, and I'll stab you with this fork, I said pleasantly, not bothering to lower my voice. Luca pulled back, irritation flashing across his face. You need to adjust your attitude, Sienna. We're engaged now. That means you belong to me. I don't belong to anyone, I said, moving his hand away. Your father seems to think differently, Luca replied, and there was an edge to his voice now. And what Giovanni Cavalieri says goes, doesn't it? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text. Christian, breathe. You're doing fine. Just a few more hours. Me. How do you know I need to hear that? Christian. Because I know you, and because I'm watching. Me. That's slightly creepy. Christian. That's comprehensive protection. There's a difference. I looked up and scanned the room, finding Marco near the window with his phone out, and realized he was keeping Christian updated. Me. Using my brother as a spy? Christian. Using your brother as an ally. He volunteered. Me. This is insane. Christian, this is necessary. Now smile at something Luca says. Make it look real. Your father is watching. I looked at my father, found him staring at me with calculating eyes, and forced myself to smile at something inane Luca was saying about honeymoon destinations. Christian, better. Now get through dessert and you can escape. I'll be waiting when you do. The promise of that, of Christian being somewhere waiting for me, made the rest of the dinner bearable, but barely. Chapter 5. Escalation. I escaped the dinner at 10 p.m., claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fabricated, and found Christian's car waiting 2 blocks from the estate, parked in shadows where no one would notice. Get in, he said through the open window, and I obeyed without questioning, sliding into the passenger seat with relief. Where are we going? I asked as he pulled away. Somewhere your father's security can't track you, Christian replied. Somewhere we can actually talk without cameras or spies, or your fiancé touching you. The word fiancé came out bitter, and I noticed his hands tightening on the steering wheel. He's not my fiancé, I said. Not really. It's just an announcement. An announcement your father expects you to honor, Christian corrected, and which means in his eyes, and everyone else's, You belong to Luca now. I don't belong to anyone, I repeated for what felt like the 100th time that day. I know that, Christian said, but Luca doesn't, which is going to be a problem. We drove in silence for another 10 minutes before he pulled into an underground garage beneath a building I didn't recognize and led me to a private elevator that required both a key card and fingerprint to access. Now where are we? I asked. My actual home, Christian said, not the family estate where business gets conducted. This is private. The penthouse was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and expensive taste without being ostentatious, and I moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city while Christian poured 2 glasses of whiskey. You didn't have to rescue me, I said when he handed me a glass. Yes, I did, Christian replied, because watching Luca touch you at that dinner made me want to kill him, which wouldn't have been good for anyone. You were watching, I said. Marco was sending updates, Christian corrected, with detailed descriptions of every time Luca put his hands on you. Your brother has a gift for making me homicidal. He's protective, I said. He's smart, Christian countered. He knows what's happening between us even if we're both pretending we can control it. Can we? I asked, turning to face him. Control it? No, Christian admitted, setting down his glass. I don't think we can. Not anymore. Seeing you with him, watching your father force this. Knowing you're trapped, I'm past the point of being able to walk away from this. Then don't walk away, I said, moving closer. And stop fighting it. And if I stop fighting it, Christian said, his voice rough, everything gets complicated. Your father will retaliate. The alliance between our families will fracture. People could get hurt. People are already getting hurt, I pointed out. I'm getting hurt. Being forced into a marriage I don't want. Losing autonomy over my own life. Sacrificing everything because men made agreements about me without my input. I know, Christian said, and I heard real pain in his voice. And I'm trying to fix it, but that takes time. Time where you have to play along with your father's plans. How much time? I asked. I don't know yet, he admitted. I'm gathering information on the Ferrara organization, looking for leverage that makes your father reconsider. But it's delicate work. If I push too hard, too fast, it could backfire. My phone buzzed, and I pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Enjoyed meeting you tonight. Bella, looking forward to getting to know you better. Much better. L.A. Luca has your number, Christian observed, reading over my shoulder, and his voice had gone dangerous. Apparently, I said, deleting the message. My father probably gave it to him. Luca, don't delete my messages. That's rude. We're engaged now. You should be more accommodating. Luca, I know you're not actually interested. I saw how you looked at Christian Rossi at the gala, but that doesn't matter. You're mine now whether you like it or not. Ice flooded my veins, and I watched Christian read the messages, his expression going absolutely lethal. He's threatening you, Christian said flatly. He's being an asshole, I corrected. There's a difference. Not to me, Christian replied, taking my phone and typing a response before I could stop him. Me. This is Christian Rossi. If you text Sienna again with anything remotely inappropriate, you'll regret it. Cram. You can't do that, I protested, grabbing for the phone. I just did, Christian said, holding it out of reach, and he needed to know there are consequences for harassing you. My phone immediately started ringing, Luca calling back, and Christian answered on speaker. What the fuck, Rossi? Luca's voice came through angry and slightly panicked. You have no right to answer Sienna's phone. I have every right when you're sending her threatening messages, Christian replied, his voice deadly calm. Back off, Luca. This is your only warning. She's my fiancé. She's Giovanni's daughter, who you're forcing into an arrangement she doesn't want, Christian interrupted. And if you push this, if you make her uncomfortable or unsafe in any way, you'll answer to me personally. Do we understand each other? Silence on the other end. Then, this isn't over. Yes, Christian said. It is. He hung up and handed me back my phone, and I stared at him trying to process what had just happened. You just threatened a made man, I said. On my behalf, using my phone. Yes, Christian agreed. My father is going to find out. I continued. Luca's going to tell him. This is going to make everything worse. Good, Christian said, surprising me. Let him tell your father. Let Giovanni know that you're not unprotected, that touching you has consequences, that forcing you into this marriage means dealing with me. That's insane, I said. You're starting a war over me. I'm preventing one, Christian corrected. Because if Luca continues down this path, if he thinks he can threaten or intimidate you, things will escalate. Better to draw the line now. Make it clear you're not an easy target. I'm not a target at all, I protested. I'm just trying to survive my father's political machinations. You became a target the moment your father announced that engagement, Christian said, because now everyone knows you're valuable, vulnerable, and being used as a pawn. That makes you currency in a game you didn't ask to play. The words chilled me because they were true, because I'd never thought about it that way, but absolutely should have. So what do? I asked. You let me protect you, Christian said. You stay here tonight where it's safe. You don't go home alone, and you don't engage with Luca until I've handled him. Handle him how? I asked warily. However I need to, Christian replied, and something in his expression reminded me exactly who I was talking to. Not just a man I was attracted to, but a Don who'd built power on calculated violence. I don't want you to hurt him, I said carefully. I won't hurt him unless he makes it necessary, Christian said. But Sienna, you need to understand something. I've spent 5 years keeping my distance, maintaining propriety, honoring agreements made by dead men. But the moment your father forced this engagement, the moment Luca started treating you like property, all of that ended. I'm not walking away anymore. I'm not pretending I don't care. And I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe, even if that means war. The declaration hung between us, fierce and absolute, and I felt something in my chest crack open because someone was finally fighting for me instead of just deciding my fate. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Christian replied. Thank me when this is over and you're free. My phone buzzed again. My father this time. Dad, Luca called, extremely upset. Christian Rossi answered your phone. Explain. Now. He already knows, I said, showing Christian the message. Then we deal with it, Christian said calmly. Together. You're not facing him alone anymore. And standing there in his penthouse with the city spread below us, and consequences building like a storm, I realized I believed him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone, even if that meant everything was about to get infinitely more complicated. Chapter 6. Protection Mode. I woke up in Christian's guest room at 6 a.m. to 17. Missed calls from my father. 12 texts from Marco asking if I was alive. And 1 message from my mother that just said, "Call me. Please. Your father is having a very loud meltdown," Christian said from the doorway, holding coffee. I can hear him yelling through the phone from here. How long has he been calling you? I asked, accepting the cup. Since midnight, Christian replied. I stopped answering around call number 8. My voicemail is very full of creative Italian cursing. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, Christian said, leaning against the doorframe with that casual elegance that shouldn't be attractive at 6 a.m. but absolutely was. Your father threatening to kill me is actually the most interesting my morning routine has been in years. He threatened to kill you, I asked, alarmed. Multiple times, Christian confirmed, with increasing specificity. He's very creative when he's angry. My phone rang again, my father's name flashing, and Christian plucked it from my hand before I could answer. Giovanni, he said calmly into the phone. Yes. She's here. She's safe. No, I'm not returning her until we discuss the Ferrara situation like rational adults, instead of you threatening me with car batteries. I heard my father's muffled yelling through the speaker. That's anatomically improbable, Christian observed. Also illegal in most countries. Are you finished? More yelling. Excellent. Sienna will meet you for lunch at the estate. 1 p.m. You, me, her, no Luca, no other family. We discuss this properly, or she doesn't come home at all. Yes. That's a threat. No, I'm not joking. See you at 1. He hung up and handed me back the phone. You have a lunch meeting. You can't just negotiate with my father like that, I said. I just did, Christian replied, and he agreed, which means he's more worried about where you are than he's willing to admit. He's probably calling every contact he has trying to track me, I said. He is, Christian confirmed. Marco's been running interference. Your brother is surprisingly good at misdirection. My phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Marco, Dad thinks you're at a spa in the countryside having a breakdown. I may have hacked the security system to show your car leaving toward the mountains at 4 a.m. You're welcome. Also, Christian Rossi's coffee is amazing. Can I live here too? Marco's here? I asked. He showed up at midnight demanding to know if you were safe, Christian said. I gave him coffee and access to my security systems. He's been having the time of his life. I found my brother in Christian's office surrounded by monitors, eating pastries and looking delighted. This is the best espionage setup I've ever seen, Marco said by way of greeting. Did you know Christian has live feeds from half the major buildings in the city? It's beautiful. I'm in love. You're supposed to be sleeping, I said. Sleep is for people who aren't covering for their sister's forbidden romance, Marco replied cheerfully. Speaking of which, Valentina Russo has called Christian 43 times since midnight. I've been declining them. It's very satisfying. 43 times, I repeated, something unpleasant twisting in my chest. She's persistent, Marco said. Also probably suspicious. You disappear. Christian disappears. Suddenly he's not answering her calls. Even she can do that math. Marco, Christian warned. What? I'm helping, Marco said innocently, by which I mean I'm making sure everyone knows exactly how worried she is about losing her claim on you. Very entertaining. There is no claim, Christian said firmly. Tell her that, Marco replied, pulling up a screen showing text messages. She's sent approximately 70 messages in the past 6 hours, ranging from concerned to territorial to borderline threatening. My favorite is, whoever you're with isn't worth destroying what we're building. We're not building anything. Christian said, but I noticed he was reading the messages with increasing tension. She thinks you are, Marco observed, which is going to be a problem when she realizes you're actually with Sienna. She doesn't need to know that, I said quickly. Too late, Marco said, pulling up another screen. She posted on social media at 5 a.m., asking if anyone had seen Christian. Your cousin Gia responded saying you were also mysteriously unavailable. Valentina put 2 and 2 together about 30 minutes ago based on this text. He showed me Valentina's latest message to Christian. You're with her, aren't you? With Giovanni's daughter? Are you insane? Oh good, I said flatly. Another person who thinks I'm a complication. You are a complication, Christian said, but there was warmth in his tone. The best kind. That's sweet, Marco said. Also stupid. Valentina is not going to take this well. She's been positioning herself as the future Rossi Donna for months. Finding out you're interested in the one woman explicitly forbidden to you is going to make her reactive. How reactive? I asked. Depends on how attached she actually is versus how attached she is to the idea of being a Don's wife, Marco replied. If it's the latter, she'll back off gracefully. If it's the former, she'll make your life extremely difficult. My phone rang. Valentina, calling me directly. Don't answer that, Christian said immediately. She's going to know I'm avoiding her, I pointed out. Good, Christian replied. Let her know. Let everyone know. I'm done pretending. That's very romantic and also strategically terrible, Marco observed. But I support it emotionally. I answered the call before Christian could stop me. Hello, Sienna? Valentina's voice came through, syrupy sweet with an edge of steel. I'm so glad I caught you. I heard you weren't feeling well last night. Are you feeling better? Much better, I said carefully. Thank you for asking. Wonderful, Valentina said. I was hoping we could have lunch today. Girl talk. There's so much happening with your engagement to Luca, and I thought we should catch up properly. Just us. It wasn't a request. It was a challenge, and I heard the subtext clearly. I know something is happening, and we're going to discuss it. I have plans today, I said. Cancel them, Valentina replied, the sweetness dropping slightly. This is important. There are things you should know about certain situations before you make decisions you'll regret. Meaning, I asked, even though I knew exactly what she meant. Meaning Christian Rossi is not who you think he is, Valentina said bluntly. And getting involved with him will destroy you. As someone who cares about your family, I thought you deserved a warning. That's very considerate, I said, my voice going cold. But I don't need warnings about situations I'm not in. Aren't you? Valentina challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you disappeared the same night he did. Neither of you are answering calls, and suddenly your father is threatening war. That seems like a situation to me. My father is always threatening war, I said. It's his hobby. Don't play stupid, Sienna, Valentina snapped, the mask slipping entirely. I've spent months building something with Christian. I'm not letting Giovanni Cavalieri's spoiled daughter ruin that, because she's bored with her arranged marriage. I'm not spoiled, I said, anger making my voice sharp. And I'm not trying to ruin anything, but I'm also not discussing my personal life with someone I barely know. You're making a mistake, Valentina said. Christian doesn't do relationships. He does arrangements. Power plays, strategic alliances. Whatever you think is happening between you two, it's not real. It's just convenient rebellion against your father. Are you done? I asked coolly. No, Valentina said, but I will be after lunch. Noon. Russo Hotel Restaurant. Don't make me come find you, Sienna. You won't like what I have to say in public. She hung up, and I stared at my phone trying to process the fact that I'd just been threatened by someone I'd met exactly twice. That went well, Marco said dryly. She seems nice. She's territorial, Christian said, taking my phone and reading the call log. And potentially dangerous if she decides you're a threat to whatever she thinks we have. Do you have something? I asked carefully. With her? No, Christian said immediately. We had dinner a few times, attended events together. She assumed that meant more than it did. I never corrected her because it was convenient cover while I was trying not to think about you. So you used her, I said. I let her think what she wanted to think, Christian corrected, which was wrong, but I'm not apologizing for it now. She made assumptions. I didn't actively mislead her. That's a fine distinction, I observed. It's an important one, Christian replied. But regardless, she's now convinced you're stealing me from her, which makes her unpredictable. Should I go to lunch? I asked. Let her say whatever she wants to say. Absolutely not, Christian said. You're not meeting her alone. I can handle Valentina Russo, I protested. I'm sure you can, Christian agreed, but I'm not risking it. If she wants to talk, she can do it with me present. That'll make it worse, I said. Good, Christian replied. Let her see that you're not alone, that threatening you means dealing with me, that whatever she thought we had is completely over. You're enjoying this, Marco observed. The whole protective possessive thing. You're leaning into it. I'm being practical, Christian corrected, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. You're being territorial, Marco said, which is fine, Very understandable given the circumstances, but let's not pretend it's purely strategic. Marco, I said warningly. What? I'm just pointing out the obvious, my brother replied. Christian Rossi, known for being controlled and strategic, is currently threatening everyone who looks at you wrong. That's not strategy. That's enough, Christian interrupted. But there was amusement beneath the command. Don't you have somewhere to be? Nope, Marco said cheerfully. I cleared my entire schedule to watch this unfold. It's better than television. My phone buzzed again. My mother this time. Mom, your father is impossible. Come home. Bring Christian. We'll sort this out like civilized people instead of him threatening to dismantle the Rossi organization piece by piece. Mom wants us both for lunch, I said. That's probably wise. Christian agreed. Your mother is the only person your father occasionally listens to. She's also going to ask extremely uncomfortable questions about what's happening between us, I pointed out. Then we answer honestly, Christian said. We tell her we're figuring it out, that it's complicated, and that your father forcing you into an engagement you don't want accelerated things. She's going to have opinions, I warned. Everyone has opinions, Christian replied. But your mother actually cares about your happiness. That makes her opinion worth hearing. We arrived at the estate at 1 p.m. exactly, and I found my mother waiting in the garden with tea and the kind of serene expression that meant she was absolutely furious beneath the calm. Sienna, darling, she said, embracing me. Christian, thank you for bringing her home safely. Of course, Christian said. My husband is inside having what I believe the kids call a meltdown, my mother continued. He's threatened 5 different revenge scenarios, called the Rossi family twice, and possibly given himself an ulcer. So we're going to sit here calmly and discuss this situation before I let you see him. Understood? Yes, ma'am, I said, because arguing with my mother when she used that tone was pointless. Excellent, she said, pouring tea. Now, someone explain to me why my daughter spent the night at Christian Rossi's penthouse, why Luca Ferrara is claiming harassment, and why your father thinks the alliance between our families is collapsing. This was going to be a very long afternoon.
Chaos is unfolding and Sienna's mom is making them have tea time to discuss the impending family war. This is chaos wrapped in Italian, politeness, and I'm obsessed, LOL.
Chapter 7. The Threat Becomes Real. My mother's tea time discussion lasted 2 hours and covered everything from why I'd kissed Christian in the first place, to what exactly my intentions were, to whether I understood the political ramifications of destroying a decades-old family alliance over attraction. I'm not destroying anything, I said for the 3rd time. Dad is forcing me into a marriage I don't want. I'm just trying to survive by running to the one man specifically forbidden to you, my mother observed, stirring her tea with perfect composure. Darling, I love you, but that's not survival instinct. That's rebellion. Maybe it's both, I said. Definitely both, my mother agreed. Christian, what are your intentions toward my daughter? Christian had been sitting quietly through most of this, letting me field questions. But now he set down his cup and met my mother's eyes directly. To keep her safe, he said simply. To give her options that don't involve marrying someone she doesn't want, and to figure out if what's between us is real or just convenient rebellion, as you put it. Honest, my mother said approvingly. I appreciate that. Giovanni would prefer you to lie and say there's nothing between you, but I find honesty more useful. Mom, I started. Hush, darling, I'm not finished, she interrupted gently. Christian, you understand that pursuing my daughter means war with her father. Not metaphorical war. Actual, complicated, potentially violent conflict. Yes, Christian said without hesitation. And you're willing to risk that? My mother pressed. Yes, he repeated. Why? She asked. And don't give me strategic reasoning or political calculations. Why are you willing to fight my husband over my daughter? Christian was quiet for a moment, and I watched him choose his words carefully. Because 5 years ago I promised my dying father I'd stay away from her, he said finally, that I'd protect her by never letting her be exposed to what I was becoming, and I kept that promise. I watched her from a distance, maintained perfect propriety, convinced myself I was doing the right thing. But watching Giovanni force her into this marriage, seeing Luca treat her like property, knowing she's trapped, I can't keep that promise anymore. My father asked me to protect her. This is how I do that now. My mother studied him for a long moment, something complicated passing across her expression. Vincent would have approved. She said finally, he loved you both, and he would have wanted Sienna's happiness more than he wanted some old promise kept. You knew about the promise, I asked. Of course I knew, my mother replied. Vincent told me himself, asked me to watch over both of you. Make sure Giovanni didn't push the issue. I've been running interference with your father for years, darling. Why do you think he only just now forced the Ferrara engagement? The revelation hit hard. You've been protecting me. Someone had to, my mother said pragmatically. Your father sees family as chess pieces. I see family as people, Those are fundamentally incompatible worldviews, but I make it work by choosing my battles carefully. This engagement is one I'm choosing to fight. You're on my side, I asked, something in my chest loosening. I'm always on your side, my mother said. Then even when you make spectacularly complicated decisions like kissing Christian Rossi in a garden with security cameras. That was not my finest moment, I admitted. It was honest, my mother replied. Sometimes honesty matters more than strategy. Now, Christian, tell me honestly, can you actually protect my daughter from the consequences of this? Or are you making promises you can't keep? I can protect her physically, Christian said. I can make sure Luca and anyone else understands that threatening her has consequences. What I can't protect her from is Giovanni's anger, or the social fallout of defying him. Those she'll have to navigate herself. With support, I clarified, looking at him. With support, Christian agreed. Good, my mother said, standing gracefully. Then let's go face Giovanni before he gives himself a heart attack. Fair warning, he's going to say terrible things designed to make you both question this decision. Don't let him. He's blustering because he's losing control, and losing control terrifies him. We followed her into the house, and I heard my father before I saw him, his voice carrying from his office in angry Italian that I caught maybe half of. He's on the phone with Luca's father, my mother said calmly, probably renegotiating terms. He does this when he's stressed. Should we wait? I asked. Absolutely not, my mother replied. Waiting gives him time to build defenses. We're going in now while he's still emotionally reactive. She pushed open the office door without knocking, and my father looked up mid-sentence, his expression shifting from angry to absolutely furious when he saw Christian beside me. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then stood slowly. You have some nerve showing up here. You invited me, Christian replied evenly. Well, demanded. Same thing. I demanded you return my daughter, my father corrected. Not escort her in like you have any right to be here. He has every right, I said, before my mother could intervene. I asked him to come. We're having this conversation together or not at all. You don't make demands in my house, my father said coldly. Then I'll leave, I replied, already turning. And you can explain to Luca why your daughter disappeared instead of honoring the engagement you forced on her. Sienna, my father started. No, I interrupted. You threatened to disown me. You forced an engagement I explicitly refused. You gave my phone number to a man who sends threatening texts. So now you get to choose, Dad. You can have a conversation where you treat me like an adult with agency, or you can have a missing daughter and a very angry Don's family asking uncomfortable questions about where I went. My father stared at me like he'd never seen me before, and I watched him recalculate whatever strategy he'd been planning. Sit, he said finally, gesturing to the chairs. All of you. We sat, and for a moment no one spoke. Tension thick enough to choke on. The engagement to Luca stands, my father said finally. This isn't negotiable, Sienna. The contracts are already being drawn up. Then tear them up, I said, because I'm not signing anything. You'll sign or you'll be cut off completely, my father said. No money, no family support, no Cavalieri name. You'll be alone. She won't be alone, Christian said quietly, and every head turned toward him. If you disown her, she has resources. She has support. She has me, you, my father said with derision. You think I'm going to let you waltz in and steal my daughter because you've suddenly decided promises don't matter. I think you're going to recognize that forcing Sienna into a marriage she doesn't want makes you the problem, not me, Christian replied. And I think you're going to be smart enough to see that the Ferrara alliance isn't worth losing your daughter over. The Ferrara alliance is critical, my father started. The Ferrara alliance is a liability, Christian interrupted. Luca's organization is barely holding together. His father is losing territory to the Eastern families. Their shipping routes are compromised by federal attention. You're tying the Cavalieri name to a sinking ship, Giovanni. That's not strategy. That's desperation. You don't know what you're talking about, my father said, but I heard uncertainty creep into his voice. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Christian replied. I've been tracking Ferrara movements for 3 months. Their financial records show massive losses. Their people are jumping ship. And Luca specifically is under investigation for trafficking violations that could bring down the entire organization. The room went silent. You're lying, my father said, but he sounded less certain. I'm not, Christian said, pulling out his phone and sliding it across the desk. That's a federal surveillance report dated last week. Luca Ferrara is being watched. Anyone associated with him is being watched, including, soon, your daughter if you go through with this marriage. I watched my father read the document, his expression shifting from anger to calculation to something that looked almost like fear. Where did you get this? He asked carefully. I have contacts, Christian said, and I use them when necessary. This is necessary. You're trying to manipulate me, my father said. I'm trying to save you from making a catastrophic mistake, Christian corrected. Sienna doesn't want this marriage. The marriage itself is strategically terrible, and forcing it anyway makes you look weak, not strong. Every family in this city will see it as desperation, not power. My father was quiet for a long time, staring at the phone, and I watched him wrestle with pride and pragmatism. Even if what you're saying is true, he said finally, backing out now makes me look indecisive. I announced the engagement publicly. Canceling it means losing face, or it means you received new intelligence that changed the strategic calculus, my mother said smoothly. That's not indecisive, that's adaptive. You call Ferrara senior, explain that circumstances have changed, and you delay the marriage pending further review. No one loses face. Everyone saves dignity. And what about Christian? My father asked, his eyes finding mine. What about the promise Vincent made me keep? About protecting you from his son. Vincent's dead, I said quietly, and the promise was about protecting me from what Christian might become. But he's become someone worth knowing, someone who fights for people instead of just controlling them, someone who gave me choices when you tried to take them all away. You're in love with him? My father said, and it wasn't a question. I don't know yet, I admitted honestly, but I'd like the chance to find out without being forced into marrying someone else. My father looked between me and Christian, something complicated working across his expression, before he sighed heavily. 1 month, he said finally. I'll delay the engagement for 1 month. Tell Ferrara Sr. we need more time for negotiations. But Sienna, if in 1 month you haven't figured out what you want, if the situation with Christian hasn't resolved itself, then we revisit the Ferrara alliance. Understood? It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I'd expected. Understood, I said. And Christian, my father continued, his voice going hard. If you hurt my daughter, if this turns out to be manipulation or a power play, I will destroy you and everyone you care about. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Understood, Christian replied calmly. Good, my father said, dismissing us. Get out of my office, all of you. I need to make some very uncomfortable phone calls. We filed out, and I didn't breathe properly until we were back in the garden. That went better than expected, my mother observed. He gave us a month, I said. That's not exactly a victory. It's more time than you had this morning, Christian pointed out. And time is what we need to figure this out properly. Figure what out? I asked. Whether we're real or just rebellion. Whether we're worth fighting for, Christian corrected. Which I already know the answer to, but you need to figure out for yourself. Before I could respond, Marco appeared around the hedge looking pale. We have a problem, he said. Luca just posted on social media. About you, about Christian, and about making sure threats are handled appropriately. It's getting attention. A lot of attention. He showed me his phone, and I felt ice flood through me at the post. Some people don't understand boundaries. Some people think they can interfere in family business. Let this be a reminder that the Ferrara family handles threats. All threats. Sienna Cavalieri, Christian Rossi. That's a public threat, Christian said, his voice going absolutely deadly. That's a declaration of intent, Marco corrected. He's escalating. Making it public means he can't back down now without looking weak. What does he mean by handles threats? I asked, even though I was afraid I knew. He means he's going to do something stupid, Christian said, already pulling out his phone. At something violent to prove a point. And that's when the first gunshot echoed through the garden. Chapter 8. When protection becomes war. Everything happened too fast and too slow simultaneously. Christian's hand on my arm pulling me down behind the stone fountain. My mother's sharp intake of breath. Marco already moving toward the house, and another shot cracking through the air hitting the statue above our heads. Stay down, Christian said, his voice absolutely calm despite the chaos, and I watched him pull a gun from somewhere I hadn't known he was carrying. You brought a gun to tea with my mother? I asked, slightly hysterical. I always carry, Christian replied, scanning the garden with professional efficiency. Marco, get them inside, now. I'm not leaving you out here, I protested. You're not dying in your mother's garden because Luca Ferrara is having a tantrum, Christian corrected. Move. Now. Marco grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the house while my mother followed with surprising calm for someone who'd just been shot at, and we made it inside before another shot shattered a window. Basement, my mother said. Already moving. It's reinforced. Your father insisted after the incident in '09. What incident in '09? I asked, following her downstairs I'd never noticed before. Later, darling, my mother replied, opening a door that revealed what looked like a panic room. Inside, Marco, call security, tell them shots fired, possible assault, and to lock down the entire property. Already done, Marco said, his phone to his ear. Dad's security team is mobilizing. They're estimating 3 minutes to reach the garden. Christian's still out there, I said, moving back toward the stairs. Christian can handle himself, my mother said, catching my arm. He's survived far worse than Luca Ferrara with poor aim and wounded pride. How do you know Luca's aim is poor? I challenged. Because if it wasn't, we'd be dead, my mother replied pragmatically. He's making a statement, not actually trying to kill anyone. Though that could change if someone does something stupid, so we're staying here until it's clear. The next 5 minutes were the longest of my life, listening to muffled sounds from above. Marco coordinating with security, my mother calmly making tea in a panic room because apparently that's what Cavalieri women did during assassination attempts. Does this happen often? I asked, accepting a cup with shaking hands. Define often, my mother replied. Your father has made enemies. Occasionally they express their displeasure. This is somewhat more dramatic than usual. I'll admit, my phone buzzed with a text from Christian. Christian, I'm fine. Luca's men retreated when security arrived. 4 shooters, all terrible aim. Probably meant to scare more than kill. Me, probably. Christian, definitely meant to scare. Real assassination attempts are quieter. This was theater. Me, comforting. Christian, I'm coming down. Don't shoot me when I open the door. Me, I don't have a gun. Christian, your mother does. I was talking to her. I turned to find my mother had indeed pulled a small pistol from somewhere and was pointing it at the door with perfect form. Mom, what? You think I married into this family unarmed? She asked. I'm not foolish, darling. The door opened and Christian appeared, completely unruffled except for dirt on his jacket, and my mother lowered the gun. Status? She asked. 4 shooters, Ferrara men based on tattoos. Already gone by the time security arrived, Christian reported. They left a message. Literally, pinned to a tree with a knife. How dramatic, my mother observed. What did it say? It's back off, or next time we won't miss, Christian said, his expression flat. Directed at me, not you. Luca's making it clear this is about me interfering, not the family. Except he shot at my daughter, my mother said, her voice going cold in a way I'd never heard before. In my garden, during tea. That makes it about the family. Agreed, Christian said, which is why I'm calling this into the commission. Luca just violated about 17 protocols by bringing violence to a neutral family property during peaceful negotiations. The commission will take weeks to respond, I said. They'll respond immediately when I tell them Luca Ferrara attempted to kill Giovanni Cavalieri's daughter, Christian corrected. That's not business rivalry. That's attacking a made man's family. It demands immediate response. You're using me as leverage, I said. I'm using the truth as leverage, Christian corrected. He did attempt to hurt you, whether intentionally or through spectacular incompetence. Either way, it violated rules that even Luca knows better than to break. My father appeared in the doorway looking absolutely murderous, his security chief behind him. Everyone alive? He asked tersely. Alive and angry? My mother confirmed. Though my rose garden is destroyed. And someone shot my favorite statue. I'll buy you a new statue, my father said, moving to inspect her with careful hands. You're sure you're not hurt? Completely sure, my mother replied gently. Giovanni, we need to discuss the Luca situation. There is no Luca situation anymore, my father said flatly. There's a Luca problem that I'm about to permanently solve. Dad, I started. No, he interrupted, his eyes finding mine. He shot at you, in my home, during negotiations. That's not business, that's personal. And I handle personal threats to my family with permanent solutions. The commission, Christian started, can have what's left when I'm done. My father finished, but Luca Ferrara crossed a line, and I'm going to make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what happens when you threaten a Cavalieri. Giovanni, my mother said carefully, perhaps we should think about this strategically. I am thinking strategically, my father interrupted. Strategically, letting an insult like this stand makes us look weak. Every rival family will see it as permission to test our boundaries. I'm drawing the line now, clearly, with consequences. I watched my father transform from politician to something colder, more dangerous, and realized I was seeing the man who'd built the Cavalieri empire through calculated violence. Sienna, my father continued, his tone shifting slightly. The engagement to Luca is over, officially. I'll handle his father personally. You're free to make your own choices about your future, including, he glanced at Christian, whatever complicated situation you're pursuing here. What? I managed, not quite believing what I was hearing. I said you're free, my father repeated. Luca violated trust, endangered my family, and proved himself unworthy of an alliance. Therefore, no alliance, no engagement, no further discussion. Just like that? I asked. Just like that, my father confirmed. Though Christian, we need to discuss parameters. My office. Now. Christian nodded and followed my father out, leaving me with my mother and Marco in a panic room, trying to process the fact that I'd apparently been freed from an unwanted engagement by being shot at. That was unexpected, Marco said finally. Your father doesn't tolerate threats to family, my mother explained. It's one of his few genuinely unbending principles. Luca threatening you flipped a switch Giovanni rarely accesses. And so what now? I asked. Now we clean up the garden, file reports with the appropriate authorities, and wait to see what your father negotiates with Christian, my mother said calmly, though I suspect it will involve strict boundaries, and probably surveillance. Surveillance, darling? You didn't think your father would just let you pursue Christian without oversight, Did you? My mother asked. He'll want reassurance that Christian isn't dangerous to you, which means proving intentions, demonstrating commitment, probably a formal courtship period with rules. That sounds medieval, I said. That sounds Italian, my mother corrected. Your father is old-fashioned about certain things. If Christian wants to pursue you properly, he'll have to do it Giovanni's way, which means traditional courtship, family supervision, and proving himself worthy. This is insane, I said. This is how our world works, my mother replied. Be grateful your father is allowing it at all. 2 hours ago, he was threatening to kill Christian. Now he's negotiating terms. That's progress. My phone buzzed with multiple texts. Valentina, apparently having heard about the shooting. Valentina, I heard what happened. Are you okay? Is Christian okay? Valentina, this is exactly what I warned you about. Getting involved with him brings violence. You should have listened. Valentina, call me when you can. We need to talk about how to handle this situation going forward. Valentina thinks she's still relevant, Marco observed, reading over my shoulder. That's adorable. She's not wrong about the violence part, I said. The violence is Luca being an idiot, Marco corrected, not Christian being dangerous. There's a difference. Is there? I challenged. Christian carries a gun to tea parties. That's not exactly safe. Christian carries a gun because our world requires it, Marco said. He also threw himself between you and gunfire without hesitation. That's protection, not danger. Before I could respond, Christian returned with my father, both of them looking slightly less homicidal. We've reached an understanding, my father announced. Christian will be permitted to court Sienna under specific conditions. Chaperoned dates for the first month, family dinners twice weekly, and absolute transparency about intentions and activities. You're treating me like I'm 16, I protested. I'm treating you like someone I almost lost today, my father corrected, his voice softening slightly. And I'm compromising, Sienna. I'm allowing something I swore I'd never allow, because I can see it matters to you. But I need reassurance that it's safe. Give me that. I looked at Christian, who nodded slightly. Fine, I said. Chaperoned dates, family dinners. But Dad, you have to actually try to get to know him instead of just interrogating him about his family history. I'll try, my father said, which was probably the best I'd get. Good, my mother said, standing. Now, everyone out of my panic room. I need to speak with the gardeners about the roses. We filed out, and I found myself alone with Christian in the hallway, while Marco went to coordinate with security, and my parents disappeared to handle the administrative nightmare of reporting an attack. Your father wants to kill Luca, Christian said quietly. I convinced him to let the commission handle it, but he's not happy about the compromise. Will the commission actually do anything? I asked. They'll strip Luca of his position, probably exile him, Christian said. It's not death, but it's permanent removal from power. That'll have to be enough. And Valentina? I asked, showing him the texts. Christian's expression darkened as he read. She's positioning herself as concerned friend while subtly blaming me for the violence. Classic manipulation. Should I respond? I asked. No, Christian said firmly. Let her think what she wants. She's not relevant to this anymore. She thinks she is, I pointed out. Then I'll make it clear she's not, Christian replied, pulling out his own phone and typing quickly. What are you doing? I asked. Sending her a message, he said, showing me the text. Christian, Valentina, I appreciate your concern, but my relationship with Sienna is not your business. We never had what you thought we had, and I apologize if I wasn't clear about that earlier. Please respect boundaries going forward. CR, that's harsh, I said. That's necessary, Christian corrected. She needs to hear it directly, so she stops inserting herself into situations where she doesn't belong. His phone immediately rang. Valentina calling. Don't answer, I said. I should, Christian replied. Better to handle this now than let it fester. He answered on speaker. Valentina, you're seriously choosing her. Valentina's voice came through, angry and hurt. After everything we've built, after months of me being there for you. We didn't build anything, Christian said carefully. We had dinner a few times. I never promised you more than that. You let me think, Valentina started. I let you make assumptions I should have corrected, Christian interrupted. That was wrong of me. But Valentina, whatever you thought we were, we're not that, and we're not going to be. Because of her, Valentina said bitterly. Because of a lot of reasons, Christian replied. But yes, Sienna is part of it. I'm sorry if that hurts, but it's the truth. You're making a mistake, Valentina said. She's complicated, damaged, comes with family drama and impossible expectations. I could have been easy. I don't want easy, Christian said. I want real, and that's what Sienna is. Silence on the other end. Then, fine, be with her, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. She hung up, and Christian looked at me with something vulnerable in his expression. That was real, I asked quietly. What you said about wanting real. Every word, Christian confirmed. Sienna, I spent 5 years pretending I didn't want you. I'm done pretending. Whatever this is between us, it's real. Complicated. Definitely. Impossible. Maybe, but real. So what now? I asked. Now we do this properly, Christian said. Chaperoned dates, family dinners, proving to your father I'm worth the risk, and we figure out if real is enough. Is it? I challenged. Enough. Ask me again in a month, Christian said, pulling me closer. When we've survived your father's scrutiny and your family's chaos and whatever else the universe throws at us, then I'll tell you if real is enough. He kissed me, careful and certain, and I kissed him back thinking that maybe, possibly, real was exactly what I needed. Even if real came with gunfire and family politics and a future I couldn't quite predict, at least it was mine to choose. Chapter 9. Proving it's real. 2 weeks later, your father is staring at me like he's calculating how to make my death look accidental, Christian observed quietly, cutting his steak with perfect precision while my entire family watched us have dinner in the formal dining room. He does that to everyone, I said, which was partially true. He doesn't look at Marco like that, Christian pointed out. Marco's his son, I replied. Different calculation. Comforting, Christian said dryly, and I saw his lips twitch slightly when my mother asked him to pass the wine. This was our 4th mandatory family dinner in 2 weeks, and the awkwardness had evolved from excruciating to merely uncomfortable, which I was counting as progress. Christian, my father said, setting down his fork with the kind of deliberate precision that meant interrogation was incoming. I've been reviewing your business portfolio. Your consulting firm handles some interesting clients. Legitimate clients, Christian replied smoothly. Everything properly documented and legally sound. I'm sure, my father said, not sounding sure at all. Though I notice you recently dissolved several partnerships. Consolidating, simplifying, Christian corrected. I'm reducing commitments that require extensive travel. Makes it easier to be present for other priorities. He glanced at me when he said it, and I felt warmth bloom in my chest. Despite the awkwardness of having this conversation in front of my entire family. How considerate, my father said, and I couldn't tell if he was being genuine or sarcastic. Giovanni, stop interrogating the man, my mother said. We've had this conversation 4 times already. His business is clean. His intentions are clear, and you're being unnecessarily hostile. I'm being appropriately cautious, my father corrected. You're being dramatic, my mother replied. Sienna, how was your chaperone date yesterday? Awkward, I admitted. Marco came along and spent the entire time providing commentary on our conversation like he was a sports announcer. I was helping, Marco protested around a mouthful of bread. You two are terrible at small talk. Someone needed to facilitate. We don't need facilitation, I said. You spent 15 minutes discussing weather patterns. Marco replied. That's not romance. That's a meteorology lecture. We were being appropriate, Christian said, but I heard amusement beneath the words. Given your brother was literally sitting between us in the movie theater. I was maintaining appropriate distance, Marco said virtuously, as instructed. You ate all my popcorn, I pointed out. That was a bonus. Marco agreed cheerfully. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and I felt my stomach drop when I opened it. Unknown. Enjoy your little courtship while it lasts. Some of us don't forget. I showed Christian discreetly and watched his expression go absolutely cold. Luca's supposed to be under commission oversight, he said quietly. He's not supposed to have access to communication. Apparently, he found a way, I said. Apparently, he's about to regret that, Christian replied, already pulling out his own phone. What's happening? My father asked, noticing the tension. Luca contacted Sienna, Christian said, showing him the message, which violates at least 3 commission directives. My father read the message, his expression darkening. I'll handle this. With all due respect, Christian said carefully, the commission needs to handle it. If you intervene directly, it complicates their authority. I don't care about their authority when someone is threatening my daughter, my father said flatly, which is why I'm asking you to trust me to handle it through proper channels, Christian replied. Let me report this. Let the commission respond, and Luca's already limited options become non-existent. He's digging his own grave. Let him. I watched my father wrestle with the urge to take immediate action versus trusting Christian's approach, and finally he nodded once. Fine, but if the commission doesn't respond within 24 hours, I'm handling it myself. Fair enough, Christian agreed. The rest of dinner passed with slightly less tension, and when dessert was served, my mother announced that she'd arranged for Christian and me to have a supervised garden time, which apparently meant we could walk the grounds as long as Marco followed at a discreet distance. Your family is exhausting, I said once we were outside, Marco trailing about 20 feet behind pretending to be interested in the rose bushes. Your family is protective, Christian corrected. There's a difference. How are you so patient with all of this? I asked, The dinners, the chaperones, my father's constant interrogation. Because you're worth it, Christian said simply, and because I spent 5 years staying away from you. Compared to that, having dinner with your family twice a week is easy. Even when my father looks at you like he's planning your funeral? I asked. Especially then, Christian replied, because it means he cares enough to be protective. That's not something to dismiss. We walked in comfortable silence for a moment, before I asked the question that had been building for 2 weeks. Is this real? I said quietly. Or are we just, I don't know, caught up in the forbidden aspect of it, the drama and danger and fighting my father? Christian stopped walking, turning to face me with an intensity that made my breath catch. You want to know if this is real? He asked. If I'm doing this because you're forbidden or because I actually want you? Yes, I admitted. Then let me be very clear, Christian said, moving closer despite Marco's presence. I wanted you before any of this happened, before your father forced the Luca engagement, before the corridor, before you even knew I existed in any real way. I've wanted you since you were 20 years old and completely off limits, and that wanting has only gotten more consuming with time. But I'm not finished, he interrupted gently. Yes, the forbidden aspect added urgency. Yes, fighting for you against external pressure made me more aggressive about pursuing this. But Sienna, I would want you in any context, forbidden or allowed, complicated or simple, with your father's approval or without it. You're not a rebellion. You're a choice. The only choice that's ever made sense. The declaration hit hard, stealing my breath, and I felt tears burn behind my eyes that I absolutely refused to let fall with my brother watching. That's real, I managed. That's real, Christian confirmed. Now, do you want to tell me how you feel, or are we pretending this is one-sided? It's not one-sided, I said, surprised by how steady my voice came out. I thought about you for years without admitting I was thinking about you. Noticed things I told myself I wasn't noticing. Wondered why you never looked at me properly and convinced myself it was because I wasn't worth looking at. You were always worth looking at, Christian said roughly. I just couldn't let myself do it. And now, I challenged. Now I can't stop, he replied, his hand coming up to cup my face. And now I look at you and see everything I was too much of a coward to reach for 5 years ago. And I'm trying very hard not to kiss you in your mother's garden with your brother 10 feet away, but you're making it extremely difficult. Marco's seen worse, I said, going up on my toes. That's not reassuring, Christian replied, but he kissed me anyway, careful and controlled, despite the heat I felt radiating from him. You two are disgustingly sweet, Marco called from his position by the roses. Also, Dad just appeared at the window. You have approximately 10 seconds before he comes out here. We broke apart, and I turned to see my father indeed standing at the study window watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Think he's going to revoke garden privileges? I asked. I think he's considering it, Christian replied, but he kept his hand on my lower back as we walked, making it clear he wasn't apologizing for the kiss. My father met us at the door, his expression carefully neutral. Christian, a word in my study, he said. Sienna, your mother wants to discuss something with you. It was clearly a dismissal, and I watched Christian follow my father inside with a slight amount of trepidation. He's not going to kill him, is he? I asked Marco. Probably not literally, Marco replied, though Dad's been making a lot of phone calls about Christian lately. I think he's running background checks. Again, he already did 3 background checks, I protested. 4th time's the charm, Marco said. Come on, Mom's in the conservatory. She wants to show you something. I found my mother arranging flowers with the kind of focus that meant she was processing something complicated. Mom, sit, darling, she said, gesturing to the bench. We need to talk about expectations. That sounds ominous, I said, sitting. It's practical, my mother corrected, setting down her pruning shears. Sienna, your father is considering giving his approval for you and Christian to move forward. Actually move forward, as in formal courtship with intention toward marriage. My heart stopped. What? He's been watching how Christian handles himself, my mother explained. How he responds to pressure, how he treats you, how he navigates your father's hostility, and Giovanni is impressed, which is not a word he uses lightly. Dad's impressed by Christian? I repeated, not quite believing it. I don't sound so surprised, my mother said with a slight smile. Christian has proven himself patient, respectful, and genuinely committed. Those are qualities your father values. But he threatened to kill him 2 weeks ago, I pointed out. Your father threatens to kill everyone, my mother replied. It's his love language. The fact that he's now considering blessing this relationship, instead of actively sabotaging it, means Christian has won him over. Mostly, what's the catch? I asked, because there was always a catch. The catch is that your father wants assurances, my mother said, about protection, about Christian's business remaining clean, about your future being secure. He's going to ask Christian some very direct questions tonight, and depending on how Christian answers, you'll either have your father's blessing or another month of supervised courtship. What questions? I asked nervously. Questions about intentions, my mother said. About whether Christian is serious enough to actually commit, or if this is still exploratory. Your father doesn't do exploratory, Sienna. If he's giving his approval, it's because he believes this leads somewhere permanent. That's a lot of pressure, I said. That's family, my mother corrected. We don't do casual in the Cavalieri world. Everything is permanent, binding, consequential. If you're not ready for that level of commitment, you need to tell Christian now, before your father has this conversation with him. I sat there processing, trying to figure out if I was ready for permanent, and realized that despite the chaos, and the short timeline, and the absolute insanity of the past month, I couldn't imagine choosing anything else. I'm ready, I said. Are you sure? My mother pressed. Because once your father gives his blessing, walking away becomes infinitely more complicated. You'll be formally attached to Christian in ways that matter to every family in this city. That's not something you undo easily. I'm sure, I said, more confidently now. Mom, I spent 5 years wondering why he wouldn't look at me. Now I know he was looking the entire time. Just couldn't act on it. I'm not walking away from that. My mother studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Good. Then let's hope Christian gives your father the right answers. An hour later, Christian emerged from my father's study looking slightly shell-shocked, and my father followed with an expression that was almost satisfied. Sienna, my father said, Christian has something to discuss with you, privately. Marco is no longer required to chaperone. Wait, really? I asked. Really, my father confirmed. You're both adults. I trust you'll behave appropriately. He left before I could question this sudden change, and I turned to Christian, who was watching me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. What did he say to you? I asked. A lot of things, Christian replied, most of them threatening, but the relevant part is that he's giving his approval for us to move forward, officially. Officially meaning, I pressed. Meaning I'm allowed to court you without supervision, Christian said. Meaning your father recognizes this as serious and permanent instead of exploratory. Meaning, he paused, something vulnerable crossing his expression, that if I'm doing this, I'm doing it with intention toward marriage. Eventually, when you're ready, the words hung between us, heavy with implication. He asked you about marriage, I managed. He asked if I was serious enough to consider it, Christian corrected, and I told him yes, because I am. Sienna, I'm not doing this to pass time or rebel against agreements. I'm doing this because I want a future with you, and your father needed to know that before he'd approve. That's a lot of commitment after 1 month, I said carefully. It's a lot of commitment after 5 years of wanting something I couldn't have, Christian replied. The month just made it clear that wanting it and actually having it are both worth the fight. I stared at him, trying to process the fact that we'd gone from forbidden to father approved in 4 weeks, and that Christian had apparently just told my father he was considering marrying me eventually. Say something, Christian said when the silence stretched too long. Please, because your father said if you're not on the same page about this, I need to back off and give you space, and I really don't want to do that. I'm on the same page, I said, finding my voice. I'm just surprised that my father approved, that you told him you were serious, that this is actually happening. Is it too fast? Christian asked carefully. Probably, I admitted, but nothing about us has been slow. We went from forbidden to shooting to formal courtship in a month. Fast seems to be our speed. So you're okay with this? He pressed. I'm terrified and excited and completely sure simultaneously, I said, which probably means I'm making either the best or worst decision of my life. Let's aim for best, Christian said, pulling me closer finally, without chaperones or watchful eyes, or my father's disapproval hanging over us, and figure it out together. He kissed me properly then, without restraint or caution, and I kissed him back thinking that maybe fast was exactly what we needed, because we'd waited 5 years already, and I was done waiting. Lena's comment. Marco ate all her popcorn while chaperoning. Luca sent threatening texts from commission supervision. The dad went from, I'll kill you, to do you plan to marry my daughter eventually, in 2 weeks. And Christian basically said, yes, I'm serious about forever, which made the dad release them from chaperoning. This family speedruns relationship milestones like they're in a competition. Epilogue. 6 months later, I found Christian in his home office at 2 a.m., still working, and I leaned against the doorframe in one of his shirts, and nothing else watching him frown at spreadsheets with the kind of focus that meant he was avoiding thinking about tomorrow. You're still awake, I observed. Can't sleep, he admitted, finally looking up. Keep thinking I'm going to wake up, and this will all be some elaborate dream. Cold feet, I teased, moving into the room. Absolutely not, Christian said, his eyes tracking over me with heat that made my skin prickle. But marrying you in front of your father and half the city's families tomorrow feels surreal. We started with you naked in a corridor and somehow ended up here. You're wearing my shirt, he observed, his hands settling on my hips as I reached him. Nothing else underneath. That's not practical. That's deliberate provocation. Is it working? I asked. Extremely, Christian said, standing with me still wrapped around him. Office or bedroom? Surprise me, I replied, and he did, taking me to neither, and instead carrying me to the massive windows overlooking the city, setting me down with my back against the cool glass. Anyone could see, I said breathlessly as he braced his hands on either side of me, caging me in. Let them, Christian replied, his forehead resting against mine, close enough that I could feel his breath. Let the whole city know you're mine. Tomorrow it's official, but tonight you're already mine and everyone should know it. Possessive, I observed, my hands sliding up to frame his face. Absolutely, he agreed, kissing me with the kind of intensity that made the city lights blur and my knees weak, taking his time until nothing existed except us. This moment, the night before everything changed officially, but felt exactly the same in all the ways that mattered. He kissed me until I forgot why I'd come to find him, until the wedding tomorrow felt both impossible and inevitable, until the only certainty was that this, us, was exactly right. Bed, he said finally, his voice rough. You need sleep before tomorrow. So do you, I pointed out. I'll sleep when I stop being terrified this is a dream, he replied, but he carried me to the bedroom anyway, and we fell into bed still tangled together. Later, wrapped in his arms with dawn starting to break, Christian traced patterns on my shoulder with careful fingers. In about 6 hours, I'm going to stand at an altar and promise to love you forever in front of everyone we know, he said quietly. And I need you to know that I mean every word, that this isn't obligation or family pressure or strategic alliance. This is me choosing you, every day, for the rest of my life. I know, I said, turning to face him. I'm choosing you too, even though you're possessive and overprotective and work too much. Especially because of those things, he corrected, pulling me closer. Now sleep. You need rest if you're going to cry at the altar. I'm not crying, I protested. We'll see, he said. The wedding day. The garden ceremony was small by Cavalieri standards, only 70 guests instead of 300, and intimate in ways that actually felt like us instead of family obligation. My mother had transformed the rose garden where we'd first kissed into something ethereal, all white flowers and soft lighting, and I stood in the house watching Christian wait at the altar through the window, looking devastating in his tux and slightly nervous in a way that made my heart ache. Ready, Piccola? My father asked, appearing beside me in his own tux, and I noticed his eyes were already suspiciously bright. Are you crying already? I asked. No, he said, too quickly. I have allergies. To emotions? I teased gently. To watching my daughter marry someone, he admitted, his voice rough. Even someone I approve of. Even someone who proved himself worthy. You're still my little girl. Sienna. Dad, I said, my own throat tight now. I know, he said, clearing his throat. I'm supposed to be strong and patriarchal and Italian about this, but you're my only daughter, and I'm allowed one moment of weakness. Mom said you'd cry, I said. Your mother is too perceptive, he muttered, but he was smiling. Sienna, before we go out there, I need you to know I was wrong. About forbidding this. About thinking Christian was a threat instead of a partner. About trying to control your life instead of trusting your judgment. You were protecting me, I said gently. I was suffocating you, he corrected, and I'm sorry. But watching how he fights for you, how he looks at you, how he became someone worthy of you, that's everything a father hopes for his daughter, even if it took me too long to see it. Now I was crying, and I didn't care about my makeup. That's the most you've said about feelings in 25 years. Don't get used to it, he said, but he pulled me into a hug. I love you, Piccola, and I'm proud of you, of who you've become, of the man you chose, of everything. I love you too, Dad, I said against his shoulder. Even when you're impossible, especially when I'm impossible, he corrected, pulling back to wipe his eyes. Now, let's go before Christian thinks you changed your mind and I have to kill him after all. The walk down the garden aisle felt surreal. Marco standing as Christian's best man, trying not to smile too widely, my mother already dabbing at her eyes, and Christian watching me approach with an expression that made my breath catch. When we reached the altar, my father placed my hand in Christian's with unexpected gentleness. Take care of her, he said quietly, and I watched a tear actually slide down his cheek. Or I'll revoke my approval retroactively. Understood, Christian said, his voice rough with emotion. My father kissed my forehead, nodded once at Christian, and stepped back to stand beside my mother, who immediately handed him tissues. He's crying, I whispered to Christian. So am I, Christian admitted, and I realized his eyes were bright too. Shh, you're devastating in that dress, though I preferred you in just my shirt at 2 a.m. Christian, I hissed, trying not to laugh. What? It's true, he said, grinning slightly. You walked down that aisle and I forgot how to breathe, just like you did pressed against those windows last night. We're at the altar, I said, blushing. Behave. Never, he replied. The officiant cleared his throat, clearly trying not to smile. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short, traditional vows with a few personalized additions about corridors and chaos, and choosing each other despite every reason not to. And when we got to the kiss, Christian pulled me close with the kind of controlled intensity that made me forget we had an audience. Married, he said against my lips. Finally, officially mine. Was 6 months of courtship not enough? I teased. 5 years too long, he corrected, and kissed me again while everyone applauded, and my father wiped his eyes with the tissues my mother kept supplying. At the reception, my father pulled Christian aside for what looked like a serious conversation, and I watched nervously until they both laughed and embraced. What did he say? I asked when Christian returned. That if I hurt you, he'll still kill me. Marriage or not, Christian replied, but that he's glad it's me, that he trusts me with the most important thing in his world, and that he saw us at the windows last night. He what? I asked, mortified. He has security cameras everywhere, apparently, Christian said, clearly amused. He said, at least you're passionate about my daughter. I'm never going near those windows again, I said, burying my face in his chest. Yes, you are, Christian corrected. Tonight, tomorrow, every night we're married, because I meant what I said. Let the whole city know. You're mine. You're impossible, I said. You married me anyway, he pointed out. Best decision I ever made, I admitted, watching my father dance with my mother, his face still suspiciously bright. Even if my dad watches security footage, especially because your dad watches security footage and still approved, Christian said. That's real acceptance. We danced while the sun set, and my father watched with tears still in his eyes, and everything felt exactly right. We'd started with chaos. A naked corridor, forbidden promises, gunfire in gardens, but we'd built something real, something worth the fight, something permanent. And watching my father cry happy tears while my husband held me close, I knew we'd made the right choice. All of them.
Now, the fun facts from our story that everyone loves, totally worth listening to. Christian handed over his jacket without looking, turned his back, took it off, tossed it in her direction, kept absolute control while dying inside. True story. He told me himself. Christian never touched her, but no other man ever saw her the way he saw her in that corridor. The promise was made by Christian's father, Vincent, to Sienna's father, to protect her from what Christian could become as a Doan. Vincent loved Sienna like a daughter. Christian stalked Sienna secretly, off the radar, for 5 years, admitted he'd wanted her since she was 20. Red dress. Her father's party. She laughed and the whole room lit up. Luca sent snipers during tea time, 4 shooters. Terrible aim. More theater than real assassination. But they destroyed her mother's rose garden. She loved those plants. Sienna's mom has a gun in the panic room, pulled the pistol with perfect form, aimed at the door, made tea during the shootout. Did you think I married into this family unarmed? A true boss. Giovanni the father went from, I'm going to kill you, to what are your marriage intentions in 2 weeks. Christian proved himself worthy by surviving interrogations and not retaliating against threats. Marco the brother was the best secondary character, declined 43 calls from Valentina for fun, hacked security to cover for Sienna, ate all the popcorn at the movies as a chaperone, supervised dating included, mandatory dinners twice a week. Marco as a chaperone at the movies sitting between them, revocable garden privileges, and 15 minutes of weather-only conversation, LOL. Giovanni approved when Christian said, I'm serious enough to consider marriage, lifted supervision, allowed real dating, and started to like him. Lena's review, why it works, slow burn that starts hot. Chapter 1 is already on fire, but it takes 9 chapters for them to truly be together. Forbiddens with a reason, not dad said no, but a death-bound promise between families for genuine protection. Competent villain, Luca escalated to a shootout, not just empty threats. Real family. A mom who makes tea during an attack. A father who changes his mind based on evidence. A brother who's funny without being dumb. Strong protagonist without being annoying. Sienna has panic, fear, vulnerability. But she confronts her father, demands choices, and isn't passive gold secondary characters Marco stole scenes. The mom is a silent mastermind. Even Valentina was well written as territorial, but not a villain. The difference? A relationship built in layers, instant chemistry, trapped for years in that corridor. But trust and commitment, took months. Christian proved himself through actions, stood up to his father, protected her, negotiated terms, waited until she was ready. I loved this story. I was inspired on this one, darling. Did you love it too? I want to know. The more you comment, the more I understand what you want. See you in the next story. That one promises everything too.